and welcome to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, where you'll hear advice from experienced safety leaders on how to protect your people and business. I'm Sara Pratley. Peter will be back next time. AI is here, and it's here to stay. We've talked about it on the show before, but I wanted to dig a little deeper into how artificial intelligence and large language models are shaping how organizations keep their people and their business safe. I could think of no one better to speak with than Dean Baratta. Dean is the Group Regional Security Manager at Microsoft, where he provides intelligence and crisis managed support for GitHub. Dean brings a wealth of experience in security, intelligence, and risk management from both private and public sectors, including roles at the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, WeWork, and now Microsoft. In this episode, Dean and I discuss AI's impact on the intelligence field and how organizations can adapt to leverage its benefits while staying vigilant against its risks. Hi, Dean. Welcome. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks, Sarah. Glad to be here.
All right. Before we jump into our main topic, Dean, I think it would be great to hear a bit about you and your team, what exactly they focus on. There's so many different layers, and I think that'll add some great context to the conversation.
So I'll preface that by saying that my talk here today, any views or opinions I give are mine alone and don't represent my employer, present or past, or any associations or organizations I've been affiliated with. That caveat aside, I am a regional manager for Microsoft, and my portfolio is GitHub, is taking care of GitHub, which is one of our acquisitions. And within that realm, I am the Director of Intelligence and Protective Services. So that covers literally everything from geostrategics to crisis management to executive protection support to individual investigations. So I like to say I'll deal everything with from Russia invading Ukraine to somebody's lunch has been stolen from an office and everything in between there. So that's currently my portfolio.
Fascinating, especially the lunch part.
Exactly.
I know you and your team have a wide range of responsibilities. I'm sure a lot of agility in there too. With that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into our main topic, artificial intelligence. So I read a lot of data and statistics. I love consuming different information as we drive forward, especially in this area. I read a stat recently that 35% of organizations are currently using AI, which I'm going to be honest, I actually feel like that seems pretty low, especially based on a lot of the conversations I'm having. But I know you and your team are definitely in that space. Can you tell us a little bit about how you and your team are leveraging AI?
So there's a lot of potential, I think, for AI to do certain tasks in the intelligence of the security field. For example, going through large amounts of security video data, looking for differences, anomalies, trends. In the IC, looking at satellite data, or in law enforcement, looking at license plates or phone data, right? There's a lot of things where you can crunch numbers quickly and find trends that might escape humans, even if they're able to sort of absorb all of the information. But when it comes to intelligence analysis, I don't use AI right now because I still have some questions about the technology in terms of the intelligence analysis space specifically. And I'm taking a little more of a wait and see approach for what some of the larger organizations, particularly government organizations, what they're going to be doing with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know being in the intelligence space myself, leading a team here and talking to a lot of other folks, I hear a lot of that. Folks who are definitely interested in using AI to sift through information or to synthesize information for different internal uses. But that analysis obviously being super incredibly important when we think about some of the credibility of what we're doing. Kind of getting at that too, I feel like AI is both incredibly amazing as well as equally scary. So maybe the other side of the coin there, we just talked about some of the ways that you guys would be using AI. What are some of the weaknesses that you see, or maybe your team is even experiencing as you look through some different tools and analysis?
So I think I see three weaknesses that give me pause from adopting it right away. The first is its tendency to, as they say, hallucinate, but as we might say in other times, just make stuff up, right? That is a huge concern of mine. I could not picture putting together an assessment for maybe executive protection or an event protection or anything and find out that, oh, some of the data included there just is manufactured from whole cloth, right? So that gives me pause. The second is AI, if rolled out inappropriately, may actually stifle creativity and insight. So what I mean by that is I've talked to some peers who have been experimenting with AI in their shops, and they've specifically said, oh, we use it for brainstorming. We use it to think about how to think about this data or what possible outcomes might be of particular scenarios. That's fine if it's integrated in a larger process that is also looking at human innovation in that process as well. My concern, thinking back to a couple decades of technology rollouts in other organizations I've been through, is that may become the be all end all of brainstorming, of innovation. And large language models are good at looking at the data that they've absorbed, but they aren't necessarily good at creating new things. That's not what they're really designed to do. And I think about time when I had a shop with my analysts and all of the conversations we've had about their portfolios, and we'd sort of mash things together, mash up ideas, and look at data from whole new perspectives. One incident in particular I keep coming back to, which was in 2010, I was working on a statewide street gang assessment for the state of New Jersey. And we were struggling with how to estimate street gang population sizes. We knew how many people were getting arrested, but we knew that was not an accurate representation of how many gang members were in a particular city or in the state. And that was a question we were always getting from decision makers, from the press, from lawmakers, all that. So we were struggling with this. We really didn't have a good way. I happened to be flipping through the TV one day, came across a public access channel where the Pennsylvania, I think it was the Department of Wildlife or the Game Commission, had a special about how they estimated white-tailed deer populations. I would never stop on this channel any other time, but they said estimated populations. And I went, what is that? And the way they described the problem that they were facing and how they went about addressing it, it wasn't something I could copy and paste, obviously, but it sparked additional ideas about how we could tackle the problem. And I just do not see a large language model saying, oh, you're trying to solve this? Well, think about deer populations or think about that, right? Like those connections, I think, have to still happen in the human brain. So I don't want to lose that. And the third concern I have with them is we don't really know what's under the hood of a lot of large language models, right? A lot of them are proprietary. Every human being has cognitive biases, and sometimes that works into our products, but we have methods and we have tools to at least try to identify those and mitigate those. Because we don't even know what the biases are in large language models, there's no good way to identify what they are, and we don't really have a good way to control for them. So in some ways, I've been thinking about it as picture your doctor, your financial advisor, or your intelligence analyst, and somebody comes to you and they say, we're going to give you a new doctor. You're not actually going to meet them. We're going to tell you they're very good, but you're not going to know anything about their education. You're not going to know anything about their background. They are prone to occasionally hallucinating and not being able to tell reality from fantasy, but they're going to tell you life critical information. Just go with it. I think most people would be like, I'm not going with that. That doesn't make me feel comfortable. And that's kind of the space I'm occupying now with some of these large language models.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I hope nobody would go see that doctor. There's something else you said that I think triggers a lot of conversation when we think about artificial intelligence and the space, right? The intelligence, the investigative space. And that's kind of the human AI combination, which we hear a lot from folks who are just like, that's the magic spot right now, right? I trust that AI has a place in the workforce, that it could do some good for us. But I also really trust the fact that a human being really needs to be integrated in this process and do, like you said, a lot of the analysis and the thought work behind it and really pull the strands. When you think about just some of the things that you mentioned, right? The hallucination, that interaction with human beings, the biases, right? When you think about all those things, how is your team approaching some of these limitations, or how are they working around some of the weaknesses or some of the scariness of AI?
That's a great question, because I think this may be my own personal bias, so buyer beware. But I still think there's tons of gold to mine in working with our humans. Our young professionals, people who are coming into the field right now, just have so much capacity. And one of the things I want to make sure we don't do is we don't shut them to the side to play and put our time and effort in this shiny new thing that has come out, because there is a lot of sort of value that I remain convinced is untapped with our humans. So oddly enough, even though a lot of our new technology is being promoted as something that will save time and give us more flexibility, all that, I think moving forward, we're actually going to have to spend more interpersonal time with our staffs, with our people, especially with the new generation coming in, to mentor them, to make sure that they develop that full set of analytical communication professional skills so that they can be sort of those superpowered people that they should be, right?
Dean, that was a great point, especially again, continuing to kind of root back to that human aspect. Really, as you mentioned, kind of building out your team and their social skills, even amidst all that is continuing to arise with technology, helping them understand how to communicate, especially with all of the analysis that they're doing. Communication can be so important. What advice would you give to organizations when it comes to maybe growing that intelligence team and function?
Yeah, it's funny when we were doing the prep call for this, just as we were wrapping up, she said, "What keeps you up at night?" And look, there's no shortage of things, right? There's war in Ukraine, there's war in Israel, there's famine, there's wildfires, there's bird flu, there's all sorts of things going on to say. And yet, I kind of surprised myself when I said, what concerns me most is sort of the state of the next generation coming in, because I think this Generation Z is facing issues that we did not face, that sort of millennials didn't even face. I'm a Gen Xer that I didn't face growing up. And I think we're going to have to spend some time addressing them differently than when we came on board. So, what do I mean by that? Generation Z that's entering the workforce now are reporting higher levels of mental distress, social isolation, less time just spent in the presence of other people, whether that's friends. Fewer of them are getting jobs when they're teenagers. So they had like no exposure to a workplace before they graduate college. Fewer, particularly males, fewer people are going to college, right? So all of these things were all happening for about a decade. And then they got slammed with COVID, which meant for 1, 2, maybe 3 years, they were even further isolated. And all of that did absolutely nothing for their communication skills, their ability to sort of have social interactions, right? And now we're about to put a tool in front of many of these folks, which is going to allow them to even further social isolate. Hey, don't want to collaborate with a coworker? Don't want to have somebody edit your work? That's all right. AI can do some or maybe all of that for you. And so I think all of these are almost creating conditions for a perfect storm where we're going to have this cohort of folks who are ill prepared to do the things that security teams most need to do, right? Which is build credibility with their decision makers in the org, build strong communication skills, written skills, as well as sort of verbal skills, be able to work under high pressure environments sometimes, under time constraints, all these things that are sort of essential for being an effective security team. Folks are coming into the workforce maybe with one strike against them already, maybe two strikes against them. And that's why I think we as managers, as leaders in that field, are probably going to need to take more time with those junior folks coming in, spend more time mentoring them, think about how we're onboarding them now. It might not be enough to do 3 days of onboard training and then say, okay, here's your desk, go to it. We may need to build in something much more structured and much more long term for them. So all of that is to say, conversely, while we're thinking about all these technological solutions giving us more time, like taking more off our plate, we may have to be putting a lot more on our plate in order to get these folks ready and sort of up to speed.
Yeah, I think you hit on so many great points there. And it's some of those skills that I think we all maybe look past, right? Does somebody have the education? Do they have the knowledge base? Do they have the certain kind of hard skills? But that communication aspect, the interpersonal aspect, it's so important to highlight, especially as we come off of so many years where things have been unusual. I feel like mental health is really important as a topic as well, especially as we think about intelligence analysts today, the things that they're looking through, interpreting, having to deliver analysis on. I know our global intelligence team sees a lot of herring material. We talk about centering ourselves, the importance of the mission and the work. It definitely keeps us all going, but still recognizing that it doesn't necessarily dull the blow of the impact. We've really tried on our side to both be proactive with trying to equip people with the capabilities to understand mental health awareness in themselves and in others, but also, there's the reactive approach too. I know there's not necessarily a one size fits all model. Everybody has to approach this from different different ends, but I'd just be curious to hear your thoughts in this area, maybe different things that you think about or different things that you and your teams kind of focus on when it comes to mental health.
Yeah, there's two things. First is I tell all my new analysts, particularly, do not seek out traumatic material if it's not essential to your work, right? I think among some, there is a sense that being exposed to that material is some sort of rite of passage, that you're not a real security professional until you've seen this. But I've never seen it make a product better, for example, or a presentation better. I've just never, or a recommendation better. So don't feel the need to sort of self-traumatize yourself. And the second is we should take our own advice. And what I mean by that is we go to our decision makers, our leaders, and we say, hey, you need to be prepared for earthquakes and wildfires and active shooters and all this. These are things that we think can happen to our workforce, our workplace. And so we think you need a plan for that. Likewise, we're in a field where it is entirely likely where our job may get us to a point of some sort of like mental stress and we need somebody. The time to come up with a plan for that is not while we're in the middle of the crisis, right? Like it's not when the building's on fire, we tell the boss, hey, we need an evacuation plan. Like we should already have that. So I usually tell my young analysts, find a counselor or a therapist you're comfortable with first. You may never need them, in which case, awesome. But if you do, hey, you know somebody to call right away. And I have on occasions when I've seen some of my analysts getting stressed, I think we're much better than we were 20 years ago, let's say. But there's still, let's be honest, there's still sort of a stigma to saying I need help or going to get help. So I've had times with some of my analysts where I said, look, I want you to go. I can't force you to go, but if I need to give you time off work to go, go. And I said, worst case scenario, you're going to spend an hour talking to a stranger. If you don't like it, guess what? You never have to do it again. But it's an hour. Like you spend more time than that sometimes on your commute. Like just do that. But you might find that it does help, that it does work. And I think in every single case where I've done that, and I think it's been 4 times, that analyst has come back and said, wow, I am glad I did that. And they have continued until they didn't need it anymore. And then they were able to move on. But it's, I think, making it explicit, making it right up front as part of the onboarding process, and then continually after that, making sure you're figuratively taking your team's temperatures and making sure that they're okay. And when they are seeing sign of stress, feeling comfortable enough to pull them aside and say, hey, I think there's something going on. But also making sure they know that they have some responsibility and agency here as well, that they aren't doing anybody any favors, themselves or their team, by powering through when they're in distress. That's not going to help anybody, and it's only going to make things worse. So making sure that they know that, yes, as managers, as leaders, we're going to try to look out for them, but it's also their responsibility to come to us, or at least when we ask, is everything okay? Not, yeah, I'm fine, I can handle it.
Yeah, and having that conversation early, I can imagine that your analysts and people that work around you being open to having that conversation hopefully makes them feel more comfortable if and when that time arises. And you mentioned having somebody on standby. I know a lot of people that have that with colleagues or with even mentors or previous relationships, but just being able to have those conversations. Transitioning a little bit back to AI, I know we definitely went down a different pathway there, which is great, but many organizations are using the technology. We talked about stats a little bit earlier. For as many that are, there are a ton that aren't. What advice do you have for those that might not necessarily be leveraging AI right now, but are maybe thinking about investing time and energy and using it to support an intelligence function?
This may sound super basic, but I would say be thoughtful about it. Like, why are we doing this? Is it because it is the cool, shiny object at the moment, or does it have some real benefit for us adopting it? Number one. Number two, thinking really carefully about how you're going to integrate it into existing operations. Certainly, there are people who are claiming that this is the most consequential invention. I think the description I heard was since fire. And if in fact that is true, then maybe it is worthwhile taking a moment to think about, do I want to just bring a burning hot fire into my house? Maybe I want to build a fireplace first. Maybe I want to have a stove, right? Like thinking about, what am I actually going to do with this big bonfire that's outside my house right now? And I think it's interesting to note that the IC and DoD are spending a lot of time and being very careful about how to use AI. They clearly see the promise of it, but they want to integrate it in a very smart way and make sure that they don't get caught up in some of the traps that we sort of outlaid earlier. And I expect that they will put out some sort of guidelines that could be a roadmap for folks. But one of my concerns is from seeing other technology rollouts over the past 30 years is organizations like the IC will adopt some new technology. As that trickles down to, let's say, less experienced, perhaps less resourced, maybe less sophisticated agencies, the guardrails that are in place at the top kind of get thrown to the wayside. And we end up at the bottom somewhere in smaller shops or newer shops that don't have them, aren't aware that they should be in place, aren't aware of the risks that they're taking by just sort of going all in with this technology. So being thoughtful and careful, unless there is an overriding clear reason not to, I think the way forward is sort of taking the time and being super thoughtful about any integrations.
You paint a great picture as usual. As we wrap things up here, the intelligence community deals with a lot of doom and gloom, which is just a part of the job, right? But I'd love to end on a positive note if we can. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what inspires you and makes you hopeful today?
So I do some adjunct teaching for intelligence classes, and I mentor a couple of young professionals. Every time I talk to these folks, I am blown away. The amount of talent and motivation that I see in people 18, 20, 22 who are just so eager to get into this field and make a difference is overwhelming. It blows me away. These people are way beyond where I was at a similar point in the life. These people, they're focused, they're smart, so enthusiastic. And after either a session of talking to them or teaching them, I come home and I'm like, oh, we are going to be so fine. These folks are going to just knock this out of the park. So that's it. It is the humans. It is the people. They are the bright spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, the next generation, the generation of Intel analysts and folks joining the community, it definitely does give us a lot of hope, especially seeing where they all are now and just entering in early parts of their career. Dean, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. So many great takeaways, not only on artificial intelligence and the use in the workplace, but just how it's having an impact on you and your teams and a lot of those warning signs and questions that I think we're all asking or should all be asking. But just so many great takeaways there. So thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you very much. And I love Alert Media. So thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Well, to learn more about Dean and his work at Microsoft, click on the link in the show notes. And for video highlights from today's episode, just search for Alert Media on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. This is Sara Pratley signing off. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, the industry's most intuitive emergency communication and threat intelligence solution. To learn more about how to protect your people and business during critical events, visit alertmedia.com. Until next time.